Regarding the next component, we'll be looking at pesticide use. Now, we must apply pesticides at some point in time during our crop production cycles. The application should be monitored and controlled throughout the crop production. You want to select the appropriate pesticide for that particular target pest, right? When you're applying pesticide, follow manufacturer's recommendations on the label for that particular pesticide. Follow the rates and the time they ask you to apply it. You must follow that amount. Don't add anything extra to say a little more will help. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. It doesn't overkill. So you want to maintain what manufacturers recommend. This is the apply rate. This is the time you should apply. We follow those instructions. The appropriate gear should be worn when applying pesticides. We must ensure we are actually dressed properly. We have the right respirator on, because sometimes you find workers in the field who apply pesticides might have on short sleeve shirts. They might use a shirt to tie around the face. That is not the correct equipment. You want to ensure we use the correct equipment, because at the end of the day, remember, it's all about your health and all about your safety. So we must use the correct equipment when we're applying pesticides in the field. The water used to mix these chemicals should also be free from contamination. Should not use dirty water, should be used clean water. Applying because remember, when you spray the crops, if it's leafy crops, it's spraying, applying on the leaves. So any dirty or contaminated water mixed with chemicals, you are introducing contamination risk to your crops. So we should try to ensure we use clean water to actually mix chemicals and apply. When mixing chemicals, only the quantities required for that application should be made, and no excess chemicals should be made. So if you know if you're supposed to make a certain volume, you make up to that volume. It's better to come back and make again than to make more than you have excess chemical remaining. Application equipment again should be calibrated and the correct rates to ensure the correct rates are being applied. Your spray can should be calibrated. Your sprayer should be calibrated to ensure that you're getting the correct rates being applied to the crop. This can affect the effectiveness of that chemical, control that particular pest or disease if the correct rates are not being applied. So it must ensure that it's calibrated. It must ensure that our equipment is maintained properly. Equipment should be washed and cleaned after use to reduce contamination of produce. We want to clean our equipment before, make sure we have clean equipment we're going to use, and we want to clean it when we finish, because we don't want to introduce again any contamination to our produce or to our fields. Records should be kept of all pesticide applications. Again, very important. You're keeping track of what you're doing, where you're doing it, who's doing it. So you can always come back now and evaluate the effectiveness of your spraying program. Signs should be erected to warn of pesticide application in the field. Very important. We might spray a field, you might have one worker who spray a field today. You might have another worker who is not aware of that pesticide application. He's going into the field to do something. So you introduce a risk to himself. So we must ensure that we have signs up to ensure, hey, this field has been sprayed. So be aware and be conscious that you should not enter that. Training and documentation. Training is very critical in pesticide application. So workers should be trained in the proper use of pesticide and application equipment. We must ensure that they are trained. You don't want to have the case where you have a worker now applying a chemical as not too sure about that chemical or how to use that chemical. We want to ensure they know what they're doing. When they apply that chemical, we want to ensure they apply it the right way. So training is very critical. Workers should be trained also in the appropriate protective gear to wear, as I mentioned earlier, and when applying pesticides. So they must ensure that they wear the correct kit when they go to the field to apply chemicals. Documentation of all training programs for workers is very important for your farm operation, because then you could naturally have evidence to show that your workers have been trained. You could also use that now to evaluate the effectiveness of that training, and if you need to do any further training of that worker or workers in pesticide application. Pesticide storage, a very important and very critical area here also too. How we store pesticides. Now sometimes I know I've seen farmers storing pesticides anyhow. We should actually look to store pesticides properly. So pesticides should be stored in a cool, dry, covered, ventilated, and secure area. Ventilated, why we know some chemicals have a kind of nauseous and toxic smell, so you don't want to be breathing those fumes. Secure, we don't want any and everybody having access to those chemicals. So we want to be sure that we have them under lock and key. and we're able to track who goes in and who takes out what. So securing chemicals is very important. Pesticides should be stored by themselves and should be stored at room temperature. You shouldn't have to keep pesticides stored in a room and these temperatures are really high and hot in there. No, that's not good storage. We need to keep it by themselves and away, not with produce, not with tools, not with other chemicals, also at room temperature. Pesticides may be stored in the original containers. Sometimes we may have a pesticide, we might transfer it in another container just to hold some. May not be a good practice because we don't know the integrity of that particular container if it's designed to actually hold that type of pesticide. So storing chemicals and other containers than their original containers is a bad practice. Dry pesticides should be stored above liquid pesticides. That's to reduce the incidence that if you have a leakage and those liquid pesticides actually get in contact with the dry ones where they contaminate that. Pesticides should not be stored in application equipment. Again, that's the reason when we mix volumes of chemicals, we mix what we need to apply for that particular time and not keep any access, because application equipment is built to store chemicals. They're built to apply chemicals. So we must not really store chemicals in this application equipment. Pesticide disposal. Pesticides should also be disposed properly. And we need to do this so we can prevent contamination to the environment. So you dispose the pesticides as instructed by the product label. Rank empty containers 3 times before disposal of them. Right? That ranks even you can, when you mix the chemical, to actually add it to the actual application equipment and use the top up to the volume. Right? Puncture those empty containers so they cannot be reused for anything. Right? Dispose of those containers properly, again, so they won't pose a human or environmental hazard.